Welcome back to the Eric Krown crypto channel, wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice Thursday morning over here, of which this week is rapidly progressing, and Bitcoin has hit the short-term, medium-term targets to the upside at about 24,200 region from yesterday's video. Now getting a pullback as expected. No, just kidding. We don't have expectations on this videos. All that I concern myself with, or all that I care about, or all that I believe in within the context of trading is, of course, statistics and probabilities, of which we'll be going over that in the higher term timeframes on this video. Other than that, I think it's time to just jump right on into it. Okay, so let's start it off right in over here. Short-term timeframes, Bitcoin, yep, did hit a high yesterday of 24,300. Oh my God, $100 higher than that 24,200-ish region. What the fuck is this Krown guy going off of yet again? No, just kidding, or hopefully kidding, but it is sometimes rather interesting to read the comments. But in this case, we did say that, hey, any sort of a pullback down to 22,500 is completely fine. That kind of brings us to where we're at today, and what essentially are the short-term timeframes suggesting as of right now? Well, 4-hour BBWP has gone into a contraction phase. That is actually a good thing, assuming that Bitcoin sets at a higher low, which we'll go over in a second. But that alongside 4-hour bearish divergence, very slight amount, didn't even register on Karaticker's RSI right here. But yes, there was a very subtle amount going on, as you can see. Does kind of lead us to where we're at right now. That accompanied with 4-hour stochastic momentum also turning down and showing downside pressure as long as Bitcoin is below $24,000, does give a little bit of a reprieve for the short-term timeframes, playing out some sideways and downside price action from here. But as you'll likely notice, we will be seeing the 6-hour turn down as well, as long as Bitcoin's below $24,000, and the 12-hour will also be turning down below about $23,000, confirmed in about 2 hours, 57 minutes, and 13 seconds. So if these do start to hang around here, I do think that Bitcoin's in for a bit of sideways and perhaps a little bit of downside as well. So that brings into the question, what are the triggering areas, and where do things start to turn into not just a pullback but a bit of a trap action with much more downside? Well, in this case, you will notice on the short-term timeframes right here, if I put on my drawing tools, we got the 0.5 fib basically in alignment with Bitcoin's last higher low, which was 21,500 and change right there. So as long as Bitcoin's above there, more or less good. And I would be keeping a keen eye on where the 382 is on this pullback as well, which is low $22,000 region. So those would be the kind of pivots that I'd be looking at. Obviously, the big one is 21.5 or so. Below there, I do start to call this a higher term time frame trap with targets back down to the $20,000 base and maybe even lower than that, or basically the base that we've been looking at for the past month and a half now. So with all of that said, again, to kind of wrap it up right there, as long as Bitcoin's above about 21.5, all's good in the hood. For the higher term timeframes to once give another try to the upside, but short term, a bit of sideways and perhaps a little bit of downside is completely fine right here after Bitcoin, cools off after what was essentially almost a 27% move right there just in the last 10 to 12 days or so. So that is a rather big move, as you might expect. Anyways, other than that, I do want to point out on the daily right here that there is something a little bit concerning actually. What is concerning about the daily here is that there is potential hidden bearish evidence forming, which would be confirmed as soon as tonight upon daily closure, basically below about 22,500. If that does happen, I would be looking for next move to basically 21.5-ish, let's say. Probably another short-term bounce right there, but I do believe that bounce would fail. So that would become my conditions for confirming a trap. Again, they're still pretty well and far away, especially undoing the last 3 days of this rally from the 19th would be rather concerning. But for right now, that's what I'd be looking at. So bringing back in mind the higher term time frame look, which I do think is rather important here, it should be known that, hey, yes, the daily jewel is getting that lift off, which is essentially hitting the next sort of resistance area, if you will. Typically are going to see a bit of sideways at minimum and hopefully another higher low for a time frame like that. And then of course, when we do go back on over into this chart over here for the 2-day time frame, I do still want to say that this is still very much valid as long as the stochastic condition is met. So this is going to be closing tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. But basically, what is the signal and why am I going over it yet again? Well, the signal is volatility versus, of course, stochastic momentum. Volatility is going to be represented by the BBWP indicator over here. here, which measures essentially the dispersion of returns. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at contractions into extreme lows. I define extreme lows as anything below 10 percentile for this time frame, and then the expansion phase from there, which you can see, many iterations, even over the last few years here. I didn't go all the way back into the annals of history. I thought that the last 3 years were completely fine, just because there's already like 11 iterations, which is plenty. And in this case, we did find that the average move from those expansion phases was about 37.5%, or a little bit above there, to be fair. And the average days taken to get to the next high or low has been about 17.5 or 17, let's say. And the stochastic momentum also has gone the correct direction on those volatility expansion plays for just under 82% of the time. So with that in mind, as we go into the actual stochastic momentum oscillator right here, you will notice that it does have upside momentum as long as Bitcoin is above 20,850. That number will change. That number will likely change a lot upon the next closure, which is again tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Obviously, I'm not going to know what the next number or pivot is going to be, but when we come back tomorrow for Friday, we will have that information. And if that does move up significantly, let's say to 21,500 region, that'd be a really good confluential factor that if Bitcoin were to lose that level, then yes, we probably are looking at a higher term time frame trap with targets back down to the lows. But until then, everything is just another higher low, and it's more likely to try again higher over the next couple weeks than not. When we do look at the average days from this, I will actually take it from the low here. When that signal actually got started. And yeah, about 17 days, or let's say about 2-3 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, I guess, would be about that. We're still looking at an intended target basically around the end of this month. So end of July, early August in this case. Let's say like the last week of July to early, or the first week of August is kind of what that would project from a statistical narrative. And again, the stochastic momentum oscillator has gotten the correct direction, basically 82% of the time. It's not perfect, but it is pretty good. And for right now, upside momentum does remain. Now, should I go over this a little bit more, or is that enough detail? I think that is enough detail for right now on this particular one. And then I also want to call out this chart over here as well. I do think that this one does provide a bit of a different but very meaningful look at the higher term timeframes, of which we'll be looking at the 5-day time frame in this case. And in this case, we're not going to be looking at an expansion of volatility. The signal is actually a contraction of volatility. So obviously the 5-day and the 2-day, these are much different timeframes, so they're doing different things. But I did think that it was rather interesting nonetheless, because it kind of comes at things from a slightly different angle while still, having a similar message essentially. So what essentially is a signal? Well, instead of, like I said, expansion, we're looking at contraction. So contraction on the 5-day BBWP indicator coming off of extremes, which I define on this time frame as anything above 80 percentile, for example. And then what constitutes a contraction phase is when the BBWP indicator itself gets a negative slope plus also being below the moving average, and that's kind of what we have right now. And as you can see, that coupled with the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator has gotten some pretty impressive mean reversion plays. So of course, this can come to the upside or the downside. For example, do we have one for the upside as of recent? I mean, we actually do, but I want to find some that's a little more obvious for an example, right? Here we go. Here we go. All right, so this was back in 2019. Okay, you can see that BBWP goes into a contraction phase, a big one, as you might guess. And alongside that, we do see 5-day stochastic momentum turning down at the same time. And that did get this nice correction for about 32%. Anyways, going back to our current iteration, I backtested all of the ones going back to the genesis of Bitcoin, actually, all 12 or so years, I think it is. And found that the average reversion play was about just under 54% from the major higher low before that signal was given. And then the stochastic momentum also has gotten the correct direction for the reversion play just under 91% of the time, which I think, if memory serves me correctly, was like 10 out of 11 times. In this case right here, the 5-day stochastic momentum continues to remain to the upside. This one just closed yesterday, or sorry, maybe it was 2 days before. Maybe it was 2 days ago, or not yesterday, but very, very recently is what I'm trying to say. And as you can see, it will be remaining with upside pressure as long as Bitcoin's above 19,250. So while short-term time frames are a bit sideways here, maybe a little bit of downside as well. You might have even already seen all of the downside there. I would be really still favoring the higher term time frames, because if we were to perhaps add on, or just kind of play around with numbers here and go from the low to about a 52, 53% move here, we're still looking at Bitcoin or sorry, we're still looking at an average target of about $26,500. I forgot to do the same thing for this one over here on the 2-day time frame, but hey, if you add about 37.5% from that signal given, what do you know? Where does that put Bitcoin? Basically in the 26, or I'm not even doing it right. Hold on, let me get the low there. It's concerning. Okay, let's see. Can we get, yes, it's right there, 37 and 26,500 bucks as well. And of course, as long as Bitcoin remains above this pivot, which, you know, so far so good at 19,250. You know, I do still favor these higher term time frame reads on price action. And then of course that also coincides with the signal that we went over here, which was the breakout from the ascending triangle. This one's on spot price action actually, which does have an implied target up to, what do you know, $26,500. And that is also in alignment and confluential with the 1.618 Fibonacci extension. So that will also be destroyed as a narrative below about 21,500 bucks. So that's very, very important for higher term timeframes. I'm not calling a move down to $21,500. I'm just saying that if Bitcoin does come back down below there and close a higher term timeframe below there, that would be a good indication that all these higher term timeframe ideas are going to turn into a trap idea and probably garner targets back down to the current lows. So with that said, you know, short term, bit of sideways, bit of downside perhaps. Maybe we've been seeing all of that already here. I wouldn't even mind another move towards, you know, 21.5 or $22,000 for that matter. But ultimately, we'd really want to see that hold if Bitcoin is going to continue to reach towards that $26,500 target sometime around the end of this month. And at that point, I do want to reiterate my long-term thoughts. That would be a really good place for a weekly lower high, just saying. You know, I do still think that best case scenario for Bitcoin long-term is that you see a more prolonged hang around these lows, like multiple months, perhaps even into the end of the year. If Bitcoin can do something like that, that would start to look really, 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 really good for a macro low. Of course, worst case scenario is 0, but the more likely worst case scenario is maybe like 6,000. But that's, you know, well and far away right now. And I don't even entertain those thoughts as a trader or investor. Not that I really trade these timeframes to begin with, until Bitcoin's like well below, let's say, 16,000 bucks. So with that in mind, you know, looking okay here in the short term, just a bit of sideways, just a bit of downside. Keep those pivots in mind, as well as the higher term time frame areas. And I think that's a good place for me to sign off. I forgot to shill Bybit. Bybit has a lovely promotion going on where they offer 0% fees on maker orders, meaning that if you put in a limit order and you do not get filled at market price, you pay no fees on that order, which is just, I mean, it's nice because it's like no, you know, just more money in your pocket. Of course, the link to get that promotion is in the description below for Bybit, and then also have my Instagram as well, which I've been, you know, aggressively posting updates, you know, typically in the morning, but sometimes throughout the days, and as well as other content too. So if you're interested in such things, definitely check it out. With that said, I'm signing off now. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.